Good afternoon to those of you who are not on the West Coast. To those of you who are in Texas, please stay safe and dry. So my name is Conrad Saam. I run Mockingbird Marketing. I started off doing legal marketing back in 2006 with Avo, and now run this little agency. I think this is going to be one of the most difficult and most important and most technical webinars that we do. One of the things that we find is frequently when a website has been redesigned, either recently or in the distant past, it's been done really poorly. And there's a big difference for me in the concept of website design and the underlying technologies to make the design function the right way. And so, Robert, how many websites have we launched? Are we in the 80s now?
Yeah, I would say that was accurate.
Yeah, so
almost triple digits.
Yeah, we're coming on a century of website launches at this point in time, and in doing so, we have really kind of turned into a process, document, checklists, things to look for before you launch a website, things to look for after you launch a website, as well as if you did do a redesign 3 years ago, things that we can go back in and look for to see whether you kind of screwed everything up and fix those things. And Robert has turned that into our internal process. And what you're going to go through here are a lot of technical things that you need to take into account to make sure that you're doing this the right way. So to be very, very blunt, I am not the technical mind in this agency. He's sitting right to my right. So enjoyed it. Take notes, and I would encourage you, we have a fairly cozy group, so I would encourage you to ask questions. Your ability to get in front of Robert, ask very specific questions, we'll go down tangents, whatever it is, take advantage of that. So use your GoToWebinar control panel to ask questions, and we will address everything that we possibly can. So with that, I'm going to do my best to stop talking, although I'm going to interrupt and ask questions from the layman's perspective as it becomes necessary.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, great intro for sure. Thanks, Conrad. So my name is Robert Williams. I'm VP of Ops here at Mockingbird. I have had the pleasure of refining this process of advanced website launches for really the last 6 years, I would say, since I started launching websites. So there's a lot of good information in here. And I did try and take a lot of the technical aspects out of this because there's a lot of basic stuff that you should really look for, and that is oftentimes implemented incorrectly or poorly or not at all. So I hope those of you who are on this webinar today are either in the middle of designing or redesigning a website, thinking about it, have done it and it didn't work out well. In any capacity, there should be plenty of takeaways here for you today. The other disclaimer I want to throw out there is I'm going to be covering a lot of the what and the why. We may find ourselves down some tangents on how, but I wanted to steer away from that because, quite frankly, the how is included in our 4-week intensive training program and then is reinforced with very hands-on experience. So the hows are oftentimes like how to fix them. And even sometimes how to identify these things can be tricky, but we're here for you on that front for sure.
Yeah, and the how, there's the what and the why, super important and straightforward. The how is, we've seen crazy stuff that doesn't necessarily, like we could do a 4-week class on the hows, right? Exactly. Maybe a 4-month class, exactly.
All right, so let's jump right in. Vital SEO elements for pre-launch of a new website. Number one here is to keep existing URL structures the same. And this is something that is almost always changed by a new developer. And there's a variety of reasons why they may change it. And only really one good exception, which I'll get into in a second. But I wanted to give you a good example of what it should look like. And quite frankly, that example is the current site's URL structure is, for example, www.mylawfirm.com/criminal-defense, and the new site structure should follow that exact same thing.
And it's exact, like Robert, the trailing slash at the end of that URL, that becomes important, doesn't it?
It does. And in fact, if you look at my example of a bad URL change, what you'll see here, and I've highlighted them in red, are two things that often change within the URL structure when you launch a new website. So the subdomain www is actually dropped from the new site, which has SEO implications. And then if you look, my personal injury FAQ page is now called common_personal_injury_questions followed by .html. So in the eyes of search engines, and especially Google, the site is already changing. That you may update your content when you launch a new website. You may do, add content to it, but the things that you can control and keep consistent, you should do so, and URLs are no exception to that. The one time I will say, and we do this occasionally, and we very much set the expectation with our clients of what the fallout will be, but if your site structure or your URL structure is actually hurting you from a technical SEO standpoint, like if you don't have any site structure at all and all your pages are just kind of blah, and just thrown up on the website and there's no structure to them. For example, if you've got your practice injury pages don't fall under practice area. Practice area, exactly, and they're all just kind of just thrown out there or up on the web. Or they're even worse, you've got, contact us underneath the practice area page, that's the reverse example of that situation. Then I would say that, now would be a good time to clean those up, but you have to understand that the reason why I'm telling you guys to keep the URL structures the same is anytime you change that, you actually devalue any links that you may have pointed to those web pages. And what I mean by devalue is, anytime you go out and you try and get people to link back to your content, which is really an important game that you play in the world of search engine optimization, when you redirect that, or if you don't redirect that page over to the new page, you lose the value of that link completely. So all of that hard work that you put into making that excellent content and getting people to talk about it, to link to it, that goes away if you change the URL.
I'm going to jump on this because this is a really important point. It's likely, I would say even more than 50% likely, that if you did a website redesign 5 years ago, whomever did it was not thinking about this specific issue. And we've run into this on many occasions where part of what we do when we launch a site is look for old versions of pages that may be out there. And it'll often coincide with a website redesign when that link disappeared from value because the page disappeared. One of the best link building things that you can possibly do is to retroactively find all the pages that had links at one point in time pointing to it. You then killed those links with a crappy redesign, and now we can go back and find the links and redirect them appropriately. So this happens, it's more than 50% of the time, right?
Yeah.
80%? Almost always, yeah.
Even when it's done by an SEO agency, this is oftentimes the first thing that breaks.
Yeah, and by the way, just because you say you're an SEO agency doesn't mean that you know how to do this.
Yeah, it breaks my heart, but it happens all too often. And take the links out of the equation, right? Even anytime you change things up, it takes time for a search engine to go through, to recrawl your website, and then to figure out what happened, right? Like what's going on here. They're pretty skeptical, I would say, search engines are, and for good reason. So they want to make sure that anytime that things change, that it's for the better. And then it takes time for you to get back into those search results and start showing up for some of the queries that you were showing up for before. So keeping things as linear as possible in this process is ideal. Moving on to number 2, and this is something that is so basic and almost always, I would say more often than URL structure changes, are heading tags. So what are heading tags? Heading tags are exactly kind of like an outline of a paper, right? They're information. It's an informative blurb about what the content that follows after it is about. And oftentimes designers and developers will use these heading tags as style elements. So So they'll put styling behind an H1 tag, and then they'll use that styling throughout your website. And so what happens is you end up with a bunch of H1 tags or heading tags that say, contact us. Right?
Yeah,
exactly. And it's almost always a widget off to the right-hand side with a form, right? And that contact us looks exactly like your the heading tag for the content, which might be super useful, like why hire a personal injury attorney in San Diego, right? But you're also telling the search engines that contact us is also really important to the content of your site. So, you know, not ideal from a dumb computer's perspective, which is an easy thing to avoid. So you'll often get, and this is something that our developers and designers have had trained out of them, is calling something else for the styling as opposed to heading tags, and really using those heading tags from a content perspective and an outline of a kind of a paper. So the search engines, and not only the search engines, but more importantly, the users understand what that page is about and what the content that follows that heading is about. And just kind of a little overview, you've got H1 through H6s. You should have one H1 on each page.
What if I have two? If one H1 is good, Robert, doesn't two sound even better?
No, because you're telling me that page is two different kinds of content, or the topic is two different things, in which case I would say, why isn't this on two different pages? You can have a couple, more than one H2, which isn't as important as an H1, and then again, you can just follow that formula through H6s if you need. But yeah, that's my soapbox for.
And we find this a lot this happens on WordPress for different reasons. For poorly designed proprietary platforms, we find this a lot, right? Where you have multiple H1s that live throughout the site. For poorly designed WordPress themes, you can also get multiple H1s that are used for the styling purposes. The other thing that we find, WordPress makes it super easy to, not unintentionally, but deliberately add multiple heading tags to your page, right? So you might be writing your little blog post, and you're like, here's the first heading, here's the second heading, and you use the H1s to style your own content. You end up writing multiple H1s into your content, whereas the way WordPress is really set up is that they use the title of your post as the H1, and everything beyond that should be an H2. Is there a plugin, like the the you can't do this wrong plugin, so you can't put an H1 in that content?
No,
that would be good.
Yeah, but I'm putting my Matt hat on, our developer hat. The variance between each theme and how they call that into the theme when they build it, or the website, in other words, for WordPress, it's never consistent. So having something that automatically does that is almost impossible.
Okay.
And fixing that, to your point, right? Fixing that issue really depends on how well that website or theme on WordPress is developed. So it could be an easy fix. They could say, oh yeah, I just pulled that in on this one place here, and then it spit it out all over the website. I just need to change it here, and we're good. Otherwise, they went in and they put that on the website in 10 different places, and you have to go and find everywhere that they've done it and remedy it that way. So,
in what will not be a shock, that is an expensive problem to fix.
It certainly can be, and it's always easier for whomever developed the website to fix. Right. Always. So that's why we're kind of covering this stuff before you launch it, like during the design and development stage. It's also a lot easier of a conversation to have with your developer.
Right.
Hey, we're not ready to go yet. I'm not giving you the green light. This project's still moving forward because there's 3 H1 tags on each of these pages, and they're not valuable to our user search engines.
Okay.
Number 3, and as I'm reading through these, like each one, like these are all very important. So don't think number 3 isn't as important as number 1. It's probably just as important. But page titles and descriptions should either improve or at the very least remain the same as what they are. Almost always what I see is, again, you put a lot of time and money and invested on-page SEO for your website, hired someone 3 years ago to go through and change all 500 page titles and update your descriptions, And then you go to redesign a website, and those change from something like injury attorneys in Tampa to home, my law firm.
And this is super easy to do programmatically. And this is ironic, the SEO plugin, Yoast, will force that new page title, right, in many cases. And so this Robert, I believe this is a non-programmatic, unscalable solution. You really have to go in and manually make sure that this is done correctly instead of relying on Yoast to create your titles for you the way they want to.
Right. And there is a bulk title change place in Yoast where you can go to change these on a larger scale, but it is something that, you know, we go through and we verify they're at least what they were. And oftentimes what we have in place is some level of SEO engagement while we're doing a redesign so that we can go in pre-launch and fix these elements. So that's why I mentioned they should at the very least remain the same.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times a redesign isn't going to include something like this, right? It's out of the scope of that project.
Right.
However, the scope of the project shouldn't be making my on-page SEO elements worse than they currently are, right? So those should remain consistent or at least improve on some level depending on what the scope of the engagement is. Cool. The other thing.
Hey, by the way, I'm going to interrupt. 0 questions. We're 20 minutes in. For those of you who have a question, I promise there are no bad questions. There are no dumb questions. I won't call you out by name. So feel free to ask whatever you would like to ask. We've got Robert as a resource, and take advantage of that.
Cool. I think it's just because I'm so thorough.
This presentation just might be so good that there are no questions.
I like to think of it that way.
I do. We'll stick with that until we're done.
Yeah. And now we'll see if 20 questions come through.
Yeah, totally.
Page titles and descriptions are also from a search engine crawler perspective. They're one of the first things that gets crawled, and therefore they're one of the first things that search engines see as relevant to what your page and what your website is about. So these are still really important. So keep that in mind as well. Number 4, broken pages. We call these 404s. So that's the response code that you get if you land on a page that doesn't exist anymore or isn't there anymore. A new website should never create new 404 errors, ever, ever. In fact, this is a fantastic opportunity for you to go through and fix the ones that you currently have. You know, when's the last time you thought about how many pages or how many blogs you've written, and perhaps you've linked to another blog that you wrote, and then maybe that blog got deleted or got moved, or you did a redesign and your URLs changed.
Are you speaking from recent experience?
Always. I'm always speaking from recent experience. So broken pages, what those are essentially, a page that doesn't exist, and you may have links to these pages, right?
Yeah.
At the very least, again, even if you don't have links to these pages, if you are linking to a page that doesn't exist on your own site, that's a waste of resources for Google to crawl. And Google doesn't like to waste a lot of resources because they have a lot of things to crawl. So making sure that those pages, the ones that you can at least fix or no longer link to, would be really wise, so that Google isn't wasting time, and Google doesn't think that they're wasting time crawling a bunch of broken pages on your own website.
Or sending people to a website with a bunch of broken pages, right? This is kind of a kiss of death, right? If you find a whole bunch of error pages, Google's like, not so sure this is a place I want to send all my traffic.
That's exactly right. And again, I'll go one step further, because this is exactly how Google thinks and operates. How is that going to be perceived by the user, right? Who cares about the crawler, right? They're not a person, their feelings aren't going to get hurt. They're not going to have a bad experience on the website. They're just going to not care, right? But someone who's trying to find help on your law firm, from your law firm, or information about what they need to think or how they need to, what they can expect from their case, if they land on something that doesn't exist or they can't find it, that's devastating. And they're going to go somewhere where they can.
And what they're really going to do is stop using Google, because Google keeps sending them these 404 pages, and that is the last thing that Google wants.
That's why Google is is obsessed with the user, and they want nothing but the best user experience from any of the sites that Google serves in their search results, whether it's from a paid perspective or a natural organic SEO perspective. That's what they're after, because that's how they make money. So 404s, avoid these. At least fix them. Don't create new ones if you aren't going to fix the ones that you currently have. So other considerations, and I kind of linked these or squished all of these into one little bullet point here. These are a little bit more technical, so this is kind of how I tone down the technical stuff. But
putting them all together.
Putting them all
Good
together,
job,
right? So I can skim over it, and you guys can be happy that you've heard it. But really, what it is it's a matter of importance. So like if you have a bunch of broken pages and your page titles changed and your URLs changed, like these the other things, honestly, they don't matter, right?
Here's my site map.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like here's the map of my site, which by the way, all of these pages within this map are broken. Like who cares? But these are certainly things that you should consider when launching a new website. And one of those is internal linking. So what is internal linking? It's links on a page that link to other pages on your website. Are those still accurate? Are they broken? Do they redirect? All of these things you should be thinking about. Content quality and content gaps are two things that we oftentimes look at during a redesign, because we often find like, hey client, you actually don't have really any good content. We need to solve that problem at the same time we're designing this website. And I would argue, and so would our designer and developers, great content leads to great design. If you don't have quality content, or if you're missing a lot of content, it's really hard to create good design around nothing, right? So keep those elements in mind as well. Internal 301, so I'm throwing another response code out at you guys, but a 301 is essentially a redirect. If you're redirecting links on your own website, again, each time Google has to follow that, it's a waste of their resources. That's something you can control. You can actually fix those internal redirects and say, this page is over here, and not have 1, 2, 20 different jumps between what you link to and what is actually on your website.
And this will happen a lot if you don't, like this is really a manual one-off process, right? You got to find the redirect, because it's very probable if your site's 10 years old, for example, that, you know, it was redesigned 7 years ago and someone put in some redirects, and then it was redesigned 4 years ago and someone put in some more redirects, and now you have a jump, and they're going to redesign it again and you're going to put another redirect, right? So this is a daisy chain of redirects that's essentially finally getting to the end page. Now, there's all sorts of problems with that, and there's not really a great programmatic way to just fix that off the bat. You have to really look one at a time, right?
Yeah, and part of that process is also examining what redirects do I currently have in place on the site before I launch it.
Bing, bing, bing.
Right? Because a lot of times what happens is you do have those redirects in place from a previous website launch, and then the next person launches it, those redirects go away. And that could be due to like a content management, like WordPress only keeps one redirect housed at a time. So you change it again, and that first one goes away, and now all of a sudden you've got an increase in 404s, right?
And so a lot of you guys have moved to HTTPS as opposed to HTTP.
Mm-hmm.
This applies as well?
It applies, not exactly, but similarly. So for HTTPS, you may actually increase the number of chains.
Okay.
For sure, because you may be linking to what's called an absolute URL. So you may include HTTP : //www, and then the following URL after that.
Okay.
And now what happens is that actually needs to go to HTTPS.
Okay.
Right. You may have other redirects in place as well that would, you know, the syntax may call for it to redirect to HTTP, and then you now have the HTTPS in place.
Okay.
So now you've got two to get to the final destination. So yeah, very similar situation there, for sure.
So my takeaway is, if we've done a recent move to HTTPS, making the assumption that we've done this poorly is a good idea.
Yeah,
and look for those problems.
99% of the time, you probably have unnecessary numbers of redirects where you could just have it go from what it was to HTTPS, what it is now. Okay. Instead of taking 2, 3, 4 other steps within that. Sitemaps. So sitemaps, you can have a couple different variations of sitemaps. HTML is one that's very useful to the users. I've personally used HTML sitemaps if it's a poorly navigated site and I can't find that page that I swear I saw that was on before. I'll go to the sitemap and I'll try and find it, and that's an HTML sitemap. And then there's an XML sitemap, which is a dynamic sitemap that is generated based on what pages you have or delete on your website. And that's one you can actually submit directly to Google through Google Search Console. So having one of these is basic 101 must-have SEO stuff.
But, you know, 30% of sites don't have one, right?
Yeah, a lot of them don't. And a lot of them, if they do have them, maybe someone manually created this XML sitemap, and you've actually added a lot of great content to your website that's no longer on this XML sitemap. Or alternatively, you've got a lot of redirected or 404 pages in your sitemap that you're submitting directly to Google. So really bad idea. I would argue not having a sitemap is better than having a sitemap with errors on it. Yeah.
A question on the sitemap thing. One of the things that I run into a lot is a site, again, has been redesigned many times.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have multiple old legacy sitemaps, right? So in the robots file, you'll find a whole bunch of different sitemaps, and it gets confusing to, like, concern, not a concern?
Yeah, concern. You should really only have one map, right? Especially if the maps differ.
Right.
It's super hard to find what you're
It's
looking
like having the Seattle map from like now and the Seattle map from 1987 and not knowing which one is the different one, right?
And things are going to change, so it's absolutely confusing. I think that doesn't happen often. I don't find it. Do you really?
I see it in the robots file. I see locations for multiple sitemaps.
So I've seen locations, but they actually don't exist.
Oh, that's a great idea. So here's the map.
So here's where the sitemap is located, Google. Here's where a different sitemap is located, Google. Here's a different, and then only one of those three works. I see that often.
Okay.
But yeah, which brings us to the robots.txt. This is essentially a file that lives on your website that gives instructions to all kinds of bots and crawlers that are out there, which also includes Googlebot and Bingbot, so the crawlers that crawl the website for the search engines. So having this configured properly so that the A can crawl it and B can find the sitemap is extremely important and fairly easy to do. I see sites get launched without this all the time, which just means that they're going to do whatever they want. But sometimes you don't want them to crawl all of your web pages for some reason. Maybe you've got a client portal, right, that they don't need to crawl and waste their time on because that doesn't need to get indexed into the search results. So things like that. The robots.txt configuration is also important. And then privacy policy and disclaimers. These are vital, not only by law in some cases or by bar associations in some states, but also to enable some advertising features. For remarketing, for example, you need to disclose that you cookie users and you use that for advertising purposes, and you need to give them an opportunity to opt out of those cookies should they wish. So these are also important elements that you need to consider before launching a site.
All right, yeah. We're done now, right?
Nope. Just getting started, guys. Settle in. Question?
I thought we had a question. We don't. So
No question.
no, sorry.
Okay. Still got to take it as a compliment. So we're going to jump into visual or vital design elements. And this is a pretty quick section. But I wanted to start with some things that you should keep in mind when dealing with design. And this is something I tell friends, family, clients, everything when it comes to design and websites. Design is subjective, and designing by committee is probably the quickest way to avoid getting things done.
And to avoid having good design.
Right? Yeah, because you can't get everyone's wishes splattered onto a website. It's just not going to work, right? It's going to look like a bad plaid shirt.
It
right?
is.
Like there's just too much to do.
And I'll tell you, the person in this office, in our own office, who I annoy the most and is probably most annoyed by me is our designer, because even a committee of 2 or 3 becomes difficult.
Yeah.
And yet the problem with law firms, and the bigger you get, the bigger the problem it becomes, is everyone wants to have a say. I would say that, and we've done this I sat in boardrooms with 12 attorneys trying to come up with a design of a homepage, and it is, I'd rather chew glass. Give someone free reign to correctly demonstrate your messaging and positioning, and get out of the kitchen.
Now, that being said, most people can spot a well-designed site from a poorly designed one, right? Like, you can look at something and go, that is actually really well done. Or you can look at something that's not and go, whoa, right, terrible. And I'd say most people, because some people still can't, and some sites still look like they were built in late 90s, early 2000s. So, and I don't see any problems with it, but know that as well. So you can kind of, when you see good design. Third, vet and trust your designer for their expertise. What I mean by trust is, like, know what you don't know, or know what you're not good at, right? So if they say that color doesn't look good with that color, believe them and trust in your vetting process and that you hired them for the right reasons. But definitely put some trust in that designer. And I'll tell you this, giving a designer a blank canvas to design is the best way to make a designer happy, right?
And to get a good product, right?
Great product, right? But, communicating what those elements are that are important to your business, to your site, and some kind of non-negotiable stuff, like, hey, we need to be able to interface into this one thing, or we have this intake process and needs to work well with that, or we really like purple, like purple's our thing, cool, like they can work with that kind of information.
We've done purple.
We've done purple.
We've done a great purple.
Purple is a good color, I like it. Go dog.
Go dog. You have to put that in.
You can heat it up for them.
Fair enough. Mason Blue.
Lastly, design is a key conversion factor. So we used to make the wrong statement that, like, who cares about the design? Like, it needs to function. You should care about the design because it does lead to good conversion. If a web page is laid out well with content, with good visuals, with great imagery, and then a nice, clear contact form that's simple and effective, you're going to win, right? So design is a key conversion factor.
All right, and I would say that actually may be one of the most important things that we miss on design, right? I need to design my website. Why?
Yeah.
The answer is, if you look at a website and you're like, gee, I don't think I would buy a pencil from those guys because it looks like they built their site 10 years ago, you're losing business. And the more traffic you get, like, the conversion factor becomes small, right? So, like, you can have, if you don't have a lot of traffic, well, let me put it in a positive light. If you have a ton of traffic, having a really smooth, slick, awesome, super professional, high converting site is awesome. So improving a conversion rate by 5% on a large traffic site can have a really big impact on your business. On the flip side, if you're dropping 100, sessions a week, improving your conversion rate by 5%, that's not going to pan out for another 2 or 3 years, right? So keep those things in mind. A really high traffic site, you may want to redesign every year or two. A low traffic site, fix the traffic as one of the primary factors. So thank you for our first question. And this is, I wrote down a version of this before, but we're gonna take this question and hijack it to answer my question. This is a design question, but we're gonna have an SEO answer to it, which is usually the case. For a law firm with a main site as well as a niche site, for example, a niche site about traffic accidents, would you recommend that the firm combine the site's content into one website or maintain both sites separately? What's the trend? Are there any pros or cons to either option? Talk about teeing up a question that I love fielding.
Yeah, and I'll field it, and then I'll let you chime in with things that I've missed. But we get this all a lot. And almost always the answer is combine them, okay? It takes a lot more marketing time and investment and dollars to market 2 sites than it does 1 site. And you can separate from a design aspect these niches within your main site fairly easily, right? You can have a different color scheme. You can have it pretend like as if it's like a totally separate site, but it's still on your primary website domain. The main benefit that you get from doing that is all the links that you might have spread out across different websites are now behind one. Okay, so all that wood's behind that arrow. And that is extremely important when it comes to SEO and coming up for natural searches.
The exception. When would we have?
Yeah, there is definitely an exception. It's when those niche sites are performing extraordinarily well, and rocking that boat is a bad idea.
Yeah. Right.
There's a few instances where you've got like a separate blog, right? As another example, and that blog is getting tens of thousands of visitors a month. Okay, and it actually does lead to some clients. Like, great, leave that there. Let it keep doing its thing. Start marketing your primary website. Maybe there'll come a time when it makes sense to combine the two. But generally speaking, when it's that successful, changing things is just a bad idea, at least in the short term. If you're willing to give up some traffic and some conversions in the short term for a long, and when I talk long term, I'm talking years. I'm not talking days, weeks. Like, long term SEO gains don't happen overnight. At least. That's when I would argue that exception then goes away, right?
We have one client, so this is another element to this. We have one client who does two practice areas that are completely unrelated, and I would even say antithetical to each other. Yep. So he does domestic violence defense and DUI. Yep. Is that right? Yep. So like those two things do not belong in the same universe. Yeah. Absolutely not. And so they really do belong. So talk about difficulty with conversion, right? They do really belong in different sites. And the trade-off here is that he's got to say, I always say it takes more than twice as much money to market two sites than it costs to market one. So his budget with us is much larger than it needs to be. But the reality is, from a design, messaging, targeting perspective, having those two things on the same domain is a complete disaster. And so he has to spend a lot of money. It works for him, it's working well, but overall, I would pull things into a single domain. The other place that we have seen this done fairly well is with advertising. So if you take the SEO elements out of this and have like pet law, right? So, which seems insane that there's pet law, but there is. So you want to have a pet law website? Give that its own place. Make it all bunnies and kittens and dogs and puppies and birds. And you can have a really strong focus on pet law that you don't rely on SEO for. You rely on advertising to generate that traffic, which then converts at a higher rate because it is a really specific site. But in general, the overriding trend, and I've seen this, like the web developers hate this, right? Because I would much rather you pay me for 17 different websites than one. Actually, I wouldn't, but most web developers would. Whereas the SEO people really like this because it's the ability to concentrate and be successful with one element as opposed to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Our worst client, actually not our worst current client has 49 domains, or had 49 domains when we started. We're down to like 4, right? We're still trying to make them smaller.
I wish, yeah, we're still working on it. But yeah, it's definitely, it's hard to let go of too, right? When that, and here's why that strategy exists. It used to work. Yeah, it did. It used to be put out a bunch of really targeted websites, don't have a bunch of different content on one website, and you're gonna perform in search. Yeah, it doesn't happen anymore.
So my first, I don't know if you know this. My very first client when I started, not even when I was just doing consulting, 105 websites, and they all worked. Yep, and they all worked, and they evolved over time. But yeah. So follow-up question, and I already know the answer to this, but I'll post it to you. Is it worth it to use niche sites for backlinks? My guess is no. What do you say?
You're getting into the black hat area here. So if those sites exist purely to get links back to your primary site, the answer is no. If those sites exist because they're useful to an end user, probably, could be, maybe. But again, you're going to have to pay a lot more to get that site to show up and to be authoritative as well as your primary site so that that link actually means something.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of like what link wheels or link farms or private blog networks essentially do, is they have a host of websites that they can go and add links back to their client sites or back to other sites that then link back to their client sites, and it's hard to track that. But it's absolutely a bad idea, because if you get caught, you get kicked out of search, and that's worse than showing up on page 2. So, yeah, I think that's my answer for that.
Yeah.
Great. So jumping into the must-haves here, and this is something, right, if you're going to have 2 separate sites for the right reasons, these things should be on both.
Yep.
Right? Phone number easily found and clickable, and generally this means it's in the upper right-hand corner. I've seen it designed well in some other places, but it's very easy and apparent, and if I'm on my mobile device, I can absolutely click and call you. Which brings me to my next must-have. It has to be responsive to screen size. I don't know, is MDOT still a thing? Are people still developing sites specifically for mobile? Responsive has been around for a long time. Essentially what it means is, depending on what screen size you're on, the website will respond to that screen size. So there's a lot of development CSS that goes into how that actually happens, and what the site looks like at every tiny change in screen size. But it's important to have, and it's extremely, extremely important for an end user to be able to use your website on whatever device that they may be browsing from.
And I'll say, if your website's 4+ years old, the likelihood that it's responsive, low.
Or it's been patched together and it looks okay on an iPhone 4, but an iPhone 7 it looks like crap, and you can't use some of it, right? So that's the other game that we play, is a lot of different devices, a lot of different browsers, a lot of different screen sizes. So it has to take into account those different devices. Contact us forms and pages kept simple. I don't know if you've ever been to a website where you're trying to submit your information, and they're asking you 20 questions, and you're like, gosh, I don't know. I need you to call me, contact me, but you can't submit the form until you fill out all 20 questions. Don't play that game, right? Get the need to know, make it simple, make it clear, and you'll convert a lot better.
And this is a hard thing for you guys, because a lot of you, when I talk to you, say, hey, I don't want all the crappy cases. I just want the good cases. And one answer to that, which is the wrong answer, is to put forth a very detailed form to take in a lot of information so you can determine whether or not you contact that person. What happens is, in doing that, you do minimize the number of forms that are submitted, right? And you do maximize the amount of information that is submitted via those forms. But you lose the cases that you want. And so one of the best ways to find the really good cases, and this is not a great answer and tough, is to weed through a lot of the bad cases. Using a contact form to weed out the bad cases is a surefire way of losing the good cases that don't want to bother filling out your very complex form. So do not use your form to vet prospects. Use the very expensive, time-consuming, annoying human process to make that happen, or you will start losing business.
Yeah, using your marketing to qualify your leads is a quick way to lose out on a lot of leads.
That's like a book title.
I think I've had a couple.
Yeah, all right, good.
I hope someone's writing these down.
And maybe it'll be a chapter.
That's awesome. Well-structured navigation. This is another thing that we've seen. In fact, we saw just recently on a full 27-inch monitor, there was the hamburger menu.
Oh, yeah.
The 3 lines stacked on top of each other as hey, this is where all of our pages are. And I look at websites all the time, and I was like, where the hell is their menu?
This is not I've seen a bunch of these.
Yeah.
The hamburger menu showing up on a desktop is a really, really horrendous design. And I've seen 3 or 4 examples of this in the last 4 months.
Yeah, it's just not intuitive. intuitive on a bigger screen. On a tablet, maybe. On a phone, sure. But yeah, on a bigger screen like that, I completely glossed over it if they don't have any navigation. And here's the thing, the why behind that is, if it's in your navigation, it's important to your website, therefore it's important for Google and search engines to crawl that information.
But it's weird that it's almost like people are designing for the phone and then hoping it works on desktop instead of the other way around. It's weird.
I will say that's another thing that's, from a technical design and development standpoint, this is where things are moving, and it should be. They're developing it mobile first, which means all the styling that's applied by default is for a phone or a smaller screen device. And then if it happens to be a larger screen, then other elements get loaded after that. And the theory behind that is, if you're on a larger screen, you've got more processing power and better internet perhaps behind that to then load those resources quickly. Whereas if you're on a smaller screen or a phone, those resources are limited, so they should by default load and load very quickly.
Is that your explanation for the hamburger menu showing up on desktop?
It is not. That's just a poorly implemented patch, probably for like, hey, it's not responsive, the menu doesn't change on a mobile phone, and I can't click these huge links or the navigational elements.
Right.
So they put a plugin on a site that has a hamburger menu, and it doesn't differentiate between big or small.
Okay. All right.
Clear calls to action. These are important, right? What are you trying to get your users to do? Is it to call you? Is it to contact you? I would argue it's both. And don't make them obtrusive. Text interface, those are quite annoying, especially on mobile. But
you want to go further?
Yeah, so some chat menus or chat programs now will actually take over. They used to be kind of like an interstitial ad where they kind of took over the screen, and Google was like, bad user experience, don't do that. So now what they actually end up doing is taking over your header and footer, which is generally where your phone or contact form would be. So they kind of force the user to use something that they may not be comfortable or willing to do. So keep that in mind as well.
And it also means that you pay a lot more, because the only way the user can contact you is via the form fill, and you pay via the form fill submissions. So you can start to spend a lot of money on a chat vendor who, for people who would have otherwise picked up the phone and called you, which would, in my opinion, convert at a much higher rate.
Yeah, exactly right. Custom imagery and professional photos. This is at the bottom of the list, but I'll tell you what, the main difference between a site that you are like, wow, I really like this one, versus the one that you may have is probably stock imagery. If a designer doesn't have the assets that another firm gave their designer, like really well done photography, that plays a huge role in making things look crisper and more professional and related to your business, quite frankly. So that is oftentimes the first thing that's overlooked, and that's something that no agency can, I mean, I won't say no agency, but we can certainly send you equipment to do that, at least at a B level. But most of the time that gets glossed over, and you're stuck with a site that's launched with a bunch of stock, models doing whatever it is that's slightly related to your practice, right? Which you can spot from a mile away. So keep that in mind as well.
I would say that from a design perspective, because we're talking about website redesign, this is some of the best money you can spend.
Absolutely.
The sites that I am most proud of that we have developed, the assets that are the best part of that, frankly, we haven't done. It's been a local photographer coming in and being able to capture the nature of a law firm. And this is where the art goes into this. How do I use photography to capture the nature of a law firm, right? And the worst example is I use stock photography. The best example is I let the personality of my subject shine through visually, the personality and even the geography. So my favorite group that we did is the father-son team, and we have immediately communicated the father-son team, the location, it goes down to things like we literally have a shot of the dad with his sleeves rolled up, right? And kind of a tussled tie, like you're letting their personality shine through in a way that, like, Robert and I can sit down with stock imagery for hours and we'll never be able to capture that. We've got them, they're in Chicago, they're standing on the bridge of a river. Like, it's just so classic, and it just so immediately communicates who they are, where they are, and a level of professionalism on a website that is missing most of the time. Replace that with the car crash stock photography, or the scale of justice. I want to blow my head off. But there's so much you can do with it, and I don't know what they spent on that, but you're not talking about ridiculous dollars. It is money very, very well spent. And get someone who's super talented.
Yeah, get a professional to do those, and you'll be in a better place. And I'll go one step further. They actually got those to us before we started designing them.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So we can design around them because they're so good. That's a huge, huge factor in how well you like your site at the end of the day.
That's a great point. Yeah.
All right, so now we're getting into kind of our secret sauce here, which is our pre-launch checklist. So this is really what this does as an agency is it covers my backside, right? It allows me to know where things currently are. It allows me to know that, I'm going to check off every moving part and make sure that everything was looked at, so that when I go to hit launch, we're not going, oh, I didn't do that thing. I got to go back real fast and do that. What else did I forget? So this, by design, is a lot more involved than the post-launch checklist, and it should be, right?
Are we sharing our whole pre-launch?
We are not. I'm overviewing some important elements of it. There's a lot within there, but I'm not giving you every single thing, and that's on purpose. Skip the page.
Yeah. So we're not going to give you items 1 and 2.
Yeah, I'm not gonna send you. You can hire us if you'd like. But essentially, my main point here is to have one. Make one, find one, take one, copy and steal. Just have one. It makes you feel better about launching. And if you're not the one launching it, make sure that they have one. Right? Ask, what's your pre-launch checklist look like? If they look at you and go, they probably haven't thought things through. Maybe you're their first website launch, which maybe you're at a price point that it should be, but it's a really quick way to kind of figure out how professional and how the level of expertise of whomever may be launching your website has.
And the flip side of that is asking for the post-launch, right? So one of the easy things to ask and get a feel for is, hey, after you launch the site, what happens? How do you make sure? And what you want to hear is and this will come in the post-launch, I'm assuming, is we're going to check to make sure that the forms work, right? We're going to look for 404 errors to make sure there are broken pages, right? And so asking for these things is a really good way to quickly assess.
And they may not give you theirs, right? But they may speak to it, and if they can speak to it, there's a good chance they have one, or they're good at BS. But at the very least, they're thinking about it, right? So yes, please have one. And this also avoids, and I took this from the page of working on cars, right? You've got a vehicle check-in list, right? The last thing you want is someone going, oh, there was a door ding after you worked on my car. And it's like, no, actually, that was on the pre-launch, right? We're happy to fix that for you. We certainly can, but that helps alleviate those really awkward, oh my gosh, you broke this, blah thing, and avoid those altogether. And so it just keeps everyone on the same page. So basic outline of what we include. First step is to get access to everything you need to launch a website. Those generally are your registrar, which is a fancy way of saying the place you bought your domain. Could be GoDaddy, could be Namecheap, could be Bluehost, could be a variety of different places, but having access and ownership of that is extremely important and necessary when launching a website. So having that at the end, hey, we're ready to launch, can you locate what your registrar is, or can you get me access to that, or does your IT have it, does your nephew have it? Doing that up front.
Does your agency have it?
Does your agency have it? Thinking about that before you're ready to launch a site makes launching a site a lot more smooth. This also allows us to kind of note any other domains that you've used in the past. Maybe you're redirecting 10 other websites that you used to have that were niche websites over to your current website. This allows us to surface those websites as well. Number two is to have all the necessary redirects in place. Now this may be, hey, you had these there before and they are still there now. It may be we had to switch some things around for X, Y, and Z, and the redirects for those are in place before we hit go. But those are extremely important to have. I always crawl the current website and keep a record of all of the pages that existed before I launched and all of their assets as well. This allows me to note any existing 404s, any existing internal 301 redirects, and essentially gives me a good snapshot of if I have 100 pages before I launch and 20 pages after I launch, something went wrong, or I cleared out a whole bunch of content and we're good to go.
So just because we're coming in on noon, and I know this is going to go long, this is being recorded. We'll post it. If you want to make sure that you get an email from that post, send me an email, Conrad@mockingbirdmarketing.com. I'll make sure that you get it. I just got a note from Ann. I'll make sure that you have access to it if anyone else wants that as well.
Perfect. Migrating tracking scripts. So before we launch, we want to make sure that we've got all of our Google Analytics scripts, any call tracking scripts, any other conversion tracking or retargeting tags, anything that you are using or currently are using for your marketing and tracking of that marketing should make its way over to the new website. It's super painful when you launch a new website and then 6 months goes by and you're like, how's my traffic? You log into Google Analytics and there's nothing but spam, and you're wondering, like, does my website suck now or did something break? So
the big thing on GA that we see all the time with agencies that should know better is they'll set up a new Google Analytics account for you, right? So here's your new website, here's your new GA data. Well, that means you're just throwing out all of your historical performance. The most important question, and I've seen this, I don't know how many times, is our new site performing better than our old site? I don't know, you just toss your old data, right? So don't do that. This is another good question to ask your agency, open-ended question. How do I handle the GA data? And the answer should be very clearly, we'll migrate your existing GA code to your new website. It's never, we will start a new GA code for you, right? Does that ever make sense?
It never, well, it does if you can't get access to it. So the one time, like if you are unable to get control of your Google Analytics account from a previous agency, vendor, whatever it may be, but you have to go through all the steps to at least try to get access to that account. I don't let anyone tell me, hey, Rob, I couldn't get this account, or we launched a new website. The client wasn't sure who had GA access, so I just gave them a new one. Ooh, that's the fastest way for me to get really angry. Part of the reason is we want to know how well things are going, and if they aren't going well, we need to have that data so we can diagnose and troubleshoot and fix.
And if they are going well,
we want to know that, hey, we told you so. Like, these are the things that we told you and what to expect, and here's the expectation meeting reality. So that's an important conversation to have as well. And the fastest way to not have that discussion and not be able to have that discussion is to not simply copy that Google script or connect Google Analytics or whatever needs to happen to get that data to continue in the same account. And then we reviewed the vital SEO elements. So what I went over, those 4 plus a bunch of technical items, we reviewed those. What are they? Have we done them? Has the content made it over? Do we need to get rid of some spammy content? Do we need to combine some pages that are essentially the same? This helps us, especially if we're rolling into an SEO engagement or an SEM engagement. It kind of helps us build that roadmap to success post-website launch. So reviewing those vital SEO elements is certainly part of that pre-launch checklist. Other items that we include in our pre-launch checklist is essentially a basic configuration of the common WordPress settings. Now, this is specific to us because we build all of our redesigned websites on WordPress. If you don't know why, it's pretty simple. WordPress is widely used. There's a ton of information out there on how to do just about everything on the web. And generally speaking, it's fairly intuitive. Not all themes or websites are created equal in that aspect. However, it allows us to say, client, here's your website. You have access. You can control everything. We're here if you need us, as opposed to you just redesigned the website on our proprietary CMS. Well, if you want to leave, that's cool. Good luck changing something, right? It changes the conversation completely to our client's best interest. So part of our pre-launch checklist is configuring those basic WordPress settings, who gets notifications, should there be comments enabled, where does the social sharings go and what do they look like when they go there, who has access and what level of access, things like that.
Hey, Robert, don't I need a social media marketing consultant to share my blog posts on my website to Facebook?
You don't need them, no. They'll tell you that you do, but you don't need them. It's actually fairly simple, and you're probably doing it currently for your personal account, so it's not terribly difficult. Contact form setup and check. This is something that we check both before and after we launch, because if you're not getting the leads, that's a big deal.
It's a really good. So the reason this is such a big deal is obvious. A, you're not getting the contact, but how frequently do we find this clustered?
To the extent where, like, I would say 20 to 30% of the time we see is that the contact forms aren't even working. And almost all of those times, they haven't been working for a really long time.
Right.
So, like, it's probably why you had the conversation to start a redesign in the first place. My website's not working. Maybe it was. Maybe they just weren't coming through, right? There's a variety of reasons as to why this may be. But whenever we launch a site, we're 100% sure that it's working before and after launch. And we don't sleep until we get that confirmation back. So.
And I'm going to take this a little bit further, because this is so insanely aggravating when it doesn't work. And like all the work we do from a marketing perspective, you go and send a contact form to a black hole, like don't bother spending anything on marketing until you make sure that this is 100% locked down. There are two things that we see frequently with the contact form setup that is done incorrectly. One is you might have multiple contact forms, right? So, hey, all right, this one works, but in fact, you're running 7 or 8 or 9 different contact forms. You got to check all of them, and you have to assume that they don't work. That's one. Number two, this stays with the theme of you have to assume it doesn't work. We put a database backup on all of our contact forms. We haven't talked about this, but this is super vital. Every time someone submits a contact form submission on one of our sites, it backs up that answer. So yeah, it's supposed to go by email to Larry, but maybe Larry's not getting stuff, or maybe Larry's on vacation, or maybe Larry went somewhere else and he's now stealing all of your business, whatever it might be. In your database, in WordPress, you can store all of the contact form submissions. And now you know what was there, and you can go back and be like, oh, here's the list of people who tried to contact us that we never heard from. And they never heard from us. And we've used it. We don't use that often, but every now and then.
We never use it because we know our contact forms work, right? If we've used it, it's an
But no, but it has that. I'll tell you why. Because we've had that situation in which the lawyer left. They were still getting the emails. This is my Larry example, right? The contact form was submitted to Larry. Larry goes to a new firm. No one thinks about it, and they've been emailing Larry for the last 12 months, right? And so it's important to be able to go back and say, oh, here's all the 20 people who tried to contact Larry that we haven't followed up with. I remember that happening, and it was one of those things where we're like, why is this not working? And finally, you find out, oh, Larry moved on, right? And that was the answer, right? If it looks like it's working, we're seeing that it's working, it's being backed up that it's working. Oh, Larry's no longer with us.
Now, what you should do in that situation is go to your IT or whomever handles emails and say, what happened? Why didn't we sunset this previous employee properly?
Right.
Because it's certainly, and this is one of our 10 commandments. It's something near and dear to my heart. It may not be our fault, but it is certainly our problem. As a marketing agency, there's a lot of things that aren't our fault, but certainly are our problem. And it's our job to be able to be the backstop right? To be the backup, to have all of the ducks in a row in case you are in these types of situations, to be able to get you that information, or at least help fix it when it does go wrong. That's certainly our job.
Great.
Lastly is to configure Google Analytics, and this kind of overlaps with G around event tracking or form fill tracking. You want to make sure that all that data is being piped into Google Analytics and it's useful. So you want to make sure you're trimming out the spam traffic, which is a never-ending battle. You want to make sure you're filtering out your own traffic, so you know when you visit it every day on the weekend because you love how cool the new site is and you're sharing it with your family. Some of that traffic's filtered out. Yeah, taking some time and configuring GA is extremely important, especially if you're entering into an engagement with an agency and you're going to be relying on that data to make vital business decisions. So,
and I would put conversions on that.
Conversions.
Form fills, is your Google Analytics accurately tracking form fills, phone calls, text message, and chat? And how many times have we seen that set up correctly in the beginning of an engagement? Never. Zero, right? I can't think of one.
Never, because it's hard. It's a pain in the butt. The VP or our director of advertising was on Saturday fixing our process for GA checklist, Google Analytics setup and checklist. He was marching through it and updating it and creating new spam filters and saying, yeah, we actually need to think a little bit more about this and how can we pipe this information in here so it's all in one place. Again, the idea there is it's nothing proprietary to Mockingbird. It is a Google product that is free and that's available to their website owners, and it's something that you guys should have access to and ownership of, for sure, ownership of. And then that will allow you to continue to use that same GA account in the future, right? Because if you're the owner, you hold the keys. All right, post-launch checklist. I promise we're nearing the end.
I knew we were going to go over.
Yeah, I did too. There's so much information, and I get excited when I'm talking about it. Again, post-launch checklist. Seriously, have one, follow it. Here are the items that we include in our post-launch checklist. Number one is we allow the search engines to crawl the site. This is missed 65% of the time. You launch a new website and that robot.txt still says, you know, don't crawl me, I'm a development site, you don't need to pay attention, I'm not ready to go live. And then you launch and it still says that and you wonder why your traffic went to zero.
We were on a very awkward call. Were you on that call? You know what I'm talking about? Where the client was like, hey, we're in WordPress. And the client said, this was early on, we didn't develop the site, we're doing the SEO for us.
Yeah.
Three-way call, us, the designer, client. The client goes, hey, in WordPress, why is that little button check that says don't let the search engines crawl my site?
Search engines from crawling my site.
Yeah. Whoops. And the designer backtracked, but it was frankly their fault for essentially telling search engines, don't look at this website. That's a great way to make sure that search engines don't look at this website.
So that's step one. Step two would be to set up and configure a TLS or SSL certificate. It makes the magic happen so your website's no longer HTTP, but it's actually secured and it's HTTPS. This is a ranking factor now, and has been for 6 months to a year. Yeah, I think it's a year. Time's flying. So having this is extremely important, and all things other than that consistent, this is what's going to put you above in terms of where your website ranks for folks. Google is very interested in making the web more secure for their users. Again, users, super important to Google. So having this set up and configured properly is kind of a non-negotiable at this point when we're launching websites. It's a monetary cost, it's a yearly cost for the certificate, and there is some setup involved as well. So there's probably a cost associated to the setup. However, it is something that is completely doable, and there's a lot of vendors that can help with that. So, CDN, Content Delivery Network, is what CDN stands for. What this does is it essentially puts your website or stores a cache of your website on a variety of servers or hosts across the nation, and that helps with speed. So if I'm pulling information from a server in Seattle, that's going to happen a lot quicker than if I'm pulling in information from a server in New York City.
I mean, it's literally the bits and bytes going through the tubes and the wire. The internet is a series of interconnected tubes, I believe.
Something like that.
Something like that. But it's literally getting the content physically closer to someone.
Yeah.
And so for those of you who are clients, I got an ugly surprise coming out for you. This costs a little more from the hosting perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And we have been kind of fronting this cost for all of our clients for the last, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years. We're moving our hosting costs up by $20. So in WP Engine, which is our recommended provider, it's another $20 a month for a CDN. And because speed is such a big issue from a SEO perspective, and we're dealing with a hyper-competitive legal industry, we've been running this for everyone, and I think everyone should run it. Situations where you wouldn't?
That's a good question.
Maybe you're the only game in town?
No, because someone's going to move in and you're going to want it.
Okay.
I can't think of one. I will say it creates some issues if you're updating your website. It might be sticky on some servers, right? So it may take some time for the CDN and the Content Delivery Network to clear their history of that and then to update it with your changes. That's a small price to pay for the speed improvement and the user improvement on the website. So,
which also means user improvement and speed means you do better from an SEO perspective, and that's why we think $20 a month is worthwhile.
Yeah, I'm trying to remove SEO, like do this for SEO reasons from my vocabulary. You should be doing it for the user, which then in turn helps you from.
You sound like you work for Google, my friend.
They're doing a good job. Their training's spectacular. So yeah, and it makes sense, right? Like if you're trying to chase Google and what Google is doing, you're chasing the wrong game, right? You're chasing your users is who you should be chasing. And you can probably keep up with them better than Google anyway. So next is to clear the cache. So once you launch the website, you want to clear that cache. That'll help propagate or update the web, and they'll get the newest, latest information. I sort of mentioned it a second ago in regards to content delivery networks. But clearing that cache is a nice step. Then I crawl the post-launch site, and I make sure it looks a lot like the pre-launch crawl that I had, or at least very similar, or there aren't any surprises that I don't remember or know about. I didn't drop a bunch of pages that were there before I hit go that I wasn't expecting to, or no, I didn't lose a bunch of assets upon launch. Extremely important. And oftentimes what we do as an agency is now that crawl, quite honestly, I don't see any 404s on the website. I don't see any internal 301 redirects. It's just something that, like, starting from that point is so much easier and makes all of the other things that you're doing for your users, aka SEO, that much more impactful. Verify that the tracking scripts are working. Log into GA. Can you see the data coming in? Is it working correctly? Log into AdWords. Did your ads get turned off because you don't have a privacy policy anymore, or did your ads get turned off or you're not reporting conversions anymore? Right. Make sure that stuff's working. Again, send a final test in email through the contact forms. We even call the call tracking numbers, right? Which is nearly impossible for us to completely mess up, right? It's either working or it's not, but we're still going to make sure it's working. And again, it wouldn't be our fault. It would be our call tracking company's fault, but it would be our fault for not catching it. So we call the number, test the number even. And then finally, we submit to Google Search Console for recrawling and indexing as just like a, hey, things changed. We're letting you know, please crawl our site. Please index the new website, which kind of helps get the ball rolling with updating your site within the search engine.
But you really want to only do H until you've done everything else.
Oh,
right?
Gosh, yeah. Because then it's a waste of index.
Like, then you have to go back.
Now Google is very suspicious of you, right? Like, well, you just submitted this, didn't you? You sure you want to submit it? But yeah, it's a lot more streamlined than the pre-launch, but it's nearly as important. And you can't, by the way, you can't set up an SSL on a site that's not live. Resources. All right, so we're obviously a huge resource to you guys. You can always give us a call. You can email me directly. My email's up on the screen there. It's just robert@mockingbirdmarketing.com. Conrad is simply conrad@mockingbirdmarketing.com. I'm also going to pitch our Legal Connect with Google in both our lovely city of Seattle. Both of these are at the end of September 20.
Number 22 in Seattle, 25 in New York.
So we're trying to stretch the great U.S. here, and we're speaking at both of these locations. We get super technical. We get into GA specifically, what to look for. We get into your paid advertising, and more importantly, Google comes, and Google's there as a resource, and they speak to their products and kind of what they're doing on their end. So at the very least, if you don't like us, Google's there, so that's cool too.
And these are both so actually the New York event is at Google's Chelsea office. The Seattle event was going to be at Google's Fremont office. We've gotten a little too big for that space, so we're looking for new space, but this will be held. There'll be a bunch of Googlers there talking about AdWords, talking about legal and the web in general. It's just, granted we designed it, but this is a amazing hands-on workshop. You can find it, legalconnectwithgoogle.com will send you to the sign-up form. This is kind of my favorite thing in the world to do.
And I'll be at both, I think. Yeah. So if you want to shake my hand, I'd be happy to shake yours.
And if you want to sit down and like have Robert look over all this pre-launch or post-launch checklist to find out if things have gone poorly for you, it's kind of to get that and make that happen.
Yeah, like Scotch.
Like Scotch, I know we do the webinars as kind of a gratis, like giving back, sharing information. We're also really good at looking at websites with a good glass of Scotch.
Screaming Frog is another tool which you would learn more about if you attended Legal Connect with Google, but that's what I use and what a lot of our industry uses to crawl websites and to get bulk data and a good bird's eye view of what's going on with your website, how many pages you have, 404s, 301s, that kind of stuff. And then and this slide will be available on the page that this webinar is hosted on our website, so you can actually click through these blogs. But we have a case study of a redesigned site launch that we have available on our website that shows what the data should look like when done well.
Well, so this is a site that we did a redesign on. This is a 40% increase, right?
Yes.
So just to set expectations, this is a crazy good result from doing a website redesign.
And they've been working with us for a long time as well. But you should still see the general trend is the point of the case study.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't see, trending at a flat line and then you launch your site, it goes down, right? At the very least, it should trend up and to the right. So which extent varies based on how much you're investing in your marketing. But
that one was a surprise for me because it was, they're getting like 2,000 a week. And
the volume was a surprise. Yeah. I didn't think we would squeeze that much more out of that because they were already so successful.
Yeah.
So I would echo that sentiment as well. However, an improvement was no surprise to me.
Okay, fair.
We also have a blog post by our lead design and developer, which I've linked to, called Web Design That Works. And then I have a third-party blog post because I have to have credibility and not just talk about our own stuff. But it's actually really well done, and it's called "There's No Such Thing as a Site Migration," and it's on Moz's blog. It's a really well articulated post around the nuances of a website launch and redesign and how they're not all equal and the things that can go wrong, and kind of framed it in a different way of thinking about it. So I encourage you to read that as well.
Who wrote it? Remember?
I tried to remember his name, and I feel terrible that I couldn't on this webinar, but I think it's Aaron something or other.
Do a Twitter shout out.
Twitter shout out for sure. Like that's
I'll do a Twitter shout out.
Yeah. I would be screaming into a hole of nothingness. But yeah, it's a really great blog, and I highly recommend it. So
We're gonna hang for 2 minutes. If any, oh, look at that. So this is Henry. Henry,
Oh, he's on the floor right here. He's just late as usual.
so because we're Seattle, we're super like cool. Come on. Here's Henry in the office.
See Henry in the office.
Can you see Henry?
Henry, what's up, buddy?
There you go. All right, good talk. So if anyone has any questions, let us know. That's Henry shaking. Would be happy to answer. Otherwise, I really appreciate all of your time. And our job always is to make this worth your time. All right, so for those of you who asked questions, many thanks. For those of you who didn't, perhaps next time we can do that. And we would love to see September 22 in Seattle, September 25 in New York, legalconnectwithgoogle.com if you want to sign up. And I think that's it. We should go have lunch. It's now lunchtime. That was long. All right, and thanks for the thank yous over the GoToWebinar panel. It's flattering. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.